morning. My name is Mike King. I'm a partner at a company called Acera Insurance Limited. We are a general insurance broker with offices across Canada. I'm a specialist in the horse industry, and I've been involved with the horse sector from an insurance professional standpoint for 30 years. In fact, this year, 30 years, but been involved with horses my entire life. So I have some perspective that I'm happy to share with those that are in attendance today. I have colleagues in several offices across the country who I would deem to be insurance experts in the equine sector, and I'm happy to be here. Okay, so for those of us that have purchased horse trailers, or for those of you that may be considering buying a horse trailer, from an insurer's perspective, there are a number of different considerations that need to be dealt with. And I'll divide them very easily into two sections. One is sort of the property or physical damage aspect of owning an asset, a trailer that might have some significant value. As you might know, as I'm sure you do know, horse trailers can come in a variety of sizes and finish. Everything from two horse bumper pole type trailers, all the way to goosenecks that can haul 7 or 8 horses at any one time. Some have living quarters, some have very elaborate living quarters. And so the values of these assets can be quite significant. So from a physical damage standpoint, it's quite important then to make sure that you have coverage on those things, because you're on the roadway, you're being towed down the road by a vehicle. An accident certainly can happen, or frankly, just as commonly, the horse trailer is parked and somebody backs into the trailer. Or as I had very recently happen, a horse trailer parked at home, not attached to anything, but just up on blocks, and a great huge tree decided to fall upon it and virtually destroyed it. So those sorts of risks are very real. And you can, of course, obtain trailer insurance to protect against those things. We would call it all risk coverage, meaning to say that if the vehicle is damaged by just about anything you can imagine, sort of external cause, of course, then you'll have some protection. And not unlike your auto or truck insurance, it would have a deductible. Like you have collision coverage on your truck, you would have collision or all risk type coverage on your trailer. And it would have a deductible of 500, maybe 1,000. If the trailer itself is very valuable, some insurers will establish a percentage of the value to be the deductible. So in the case of a trailer, for instance, at 50,000, if the deductible was 10%, which could conceivably happen, the deductible therefore would be $5,000. So there are some things that need to be addressed on that part of it. The other aspect of insurance related to trailers is the liability insurance, and we'll talk about some of the elements of that in a little bit. But just the basic liability associated with having a trailer is actually quite simple, because as soon as the trailer is attached to the towing vehicle, then the liability insurance that comes from the towing vehicle extends to the trailer, because under law in every province in Canada, the vehicle becomes one. They're not independent. So a common misconception is that you need to buy liability insurance for your trailer separately from the liability insurance you have on the towing vehicle, and that's simply not true. They become one vehicle when they are adjoined, and to that end, the liability extends automatically from the towing vehicle. What's very important, however, for both the property damage side of things as well as the liability, is that you're advising your insurance provider, presumably of the truck, that you own a trailer. That advice should be provided to them, whether it's a horse trailer, a boat trailer, a utility trailer, or what have we, just so that the insuring company is aware that you do own a trailer that might be attached to the vehicle at some juncture, that makes the vehicle somewhat different than it is without the trailer attached. So physical damage coverage on the trailer, liability associated with the trailer itself. Those are two sort of basic elements. The liability can also then, when it's done properly, extend to cover what we call care, custody, and control of non-owned horses, or indeed something that needs to be discussed. We're going to talk about personal use of the trailer and commercial use of the trailer in a few moments. But so just keep that in mind as we move forward. If you're being compensated with an expectation of profit, doesn't matter how small the profit is, then there's no question in any court of law you would be deemed to be a commercial operator. Putting a sign on the side of your truck or trailer saying horse hauling, trailer for hire, all of those things are obvious triggers that would tell a consumer, potentially a customer, that you are in the business of hauling horses. Very few trailers have those signs on them anymore. People don't advertise it, but we certainly know that folks do charge for the service of hauling a horse. I'll use a coach in a barn as an easy example. Coach decides to take 5 students to a horse show. Part of that operation involves the coach having these animals that don't belong to them in their trailer off to the show. End of the horse show, end of the month, the consumer, the horse owner, gets a bill for horse hauling. That's commercial transport. There's absolutely no debate about that. That's very different from the scenario, which also happens quite regularly. And I did it certainly when I was horse showing. I had a 2-horse trailer, and it was almost certain that if I was going to a horse show, somebody else in the barn was going to go to the same horse show. We'd split the expense. They would give me $50 for gas. They would buy me lunch. They would do those things. I certainly was not in the business of hauling horses for money, but that compensation was never intended to be profitable for me. It was just recognition as a thank you to say, thanks for taking me to the horse show, Mike, or we'll share the expense. Again, that's not an issue. The reason this becomes so critically important is it gets a little complicated, but I'll do my best to explain it. The vehicle, I mentioned a moment ago that the vehicle insurance extends liability to the trailer. If the insuring company is not aware that you are charging for services and your vehicle is insured under a personal policy, if there were an incident where you actually were in a commercial environment, a claim occurs or some other thing, it's very likely that your insurer would not respond. In other words, you'd have no coverage. The example I'll give is this. The coach, again, is on their way to a horse show. They've got my horse in it. It's certainly one of those circumstances where the coach is going to charge me $100 for the privilege of taking me to the horse show. I get in a traffic accident. The person that I've hit, let's say I rear-ended somebody because I didn't stop quickly enough. They decide to sue. I report the claim to my insuring company saying I rear-ended a guy. The claims adjuster is going to say, well, what were you doing? Well, I was on my way to a horse show. Oh, you're okay. You're on the way to a horse show. Yes, I have horses. I had horses in the horse trailer. Well, were they your horses or someone else's horses? Well, they were someone else's horses. Well, do you charge for that service? Yes, I do. Well, you're not insured for that. Now the insurer would have absolutely no obligation to respond for you and to provide a defense for you because you've been sued by that third party for hitting them by rear-ending them in the back. So again, I can't stress this enough that if you do intend to haul horses for compensation, where there's any question about whether or not you would be a commercial transport, even in a single circumstance, you got to tell your insurer. Because what they're going to do then is they're going to adjust the liability insurance that is provided to the truck and deem it a commercial use vehicle as compared to a personal use vehicle. Whether it costs you a lot of money, it depends entirely on 1,000 different circumstances that we can't get into today. But it's critically important that you make sure that you've talked to your insurance provider about what the actual use of the vehicle is. And it's no different than the conversation you should be having with your insurance provider when you purchase a car or purchase a truck. What are you going to use the vehicle for? Are you driving it to and from work? Are you using it purely for pleasure? Are you using it for commercial purposes? Is there any compensation that might come from it? All those elements become very, very important. So commercial use and personal use are very clear from an insurer's perspective. And it's very important that you have a conversation with your provider to make sure that you're in the right category so that you're fully protected with the policy that you have. If a consumer is going out to buy a trailer, I would guess that they have some expectation about how many horses they're going to be able to haul, vis-a-vis how big the trailer is. So I guess this whole sort of thought process really should begin right at the outset when they're in dealership showroom. or out on the lot to say, well, I want a 4 horse, but I only have 1 horse. Well, presumably then you intend to haul other horses. So again, it's having the conversations at the outset with your insurance provider to say, if I bought this trailer, what are the implications? If I plan to use it in this circumstance, what are the implications? Last thing I'll mention too is that very often with trailers and with vehicles in general, the insurance company has a right to know, I suppose, where the general use of the vehicle might be. We have lots of folks who, right now, being February and snowy outside, are enjoying sunshine down in Florida or in Arizona for folks on the West Coast at horse shows and what have we. The insurer kind of needs to know that. They need to know that you're going to be spending 4 months down in Florida. May not change the coverage, but again, I keep coming back to this. But it's so very important for you to be having regular conversations with your insurance provider to make certain that there are no gaps that could frankly come back and bite you hard when you if you're in a circumstance that wasn't known to them. Um, the other thing I want to talk about is to get insurance on the trailer. I'll going back a little bit in time. What type of information does your insurer need? Well, we need to know the year, the make, the model. We need to know the use of it, as I've discussed at length here. We probably want photographs of the trailer. The reason we want photographs of the trailer is that we want to make sure that there's no previous damage on the trailer. So many trailers do change hands over time. The age of the trailer will have an impact on cost of coverage. Um, we do want a bill of sale to make sure that the vehicle is registered in the name of the same name as the insurance policy. And that sounds so fundamental, but frankly, very often we'll get somebody to say, well, dad bought me the trailer, mom bought me the trailer, or the trailer's in my wife's name or my husband's name or my partner's name, but I want to put it on my policy. Well, you can't insure stuff you don't own. So that's part of the reason we would be asking for a bill of sale, as well as to establish the value. This isn't replacement cost insurance per se. Typically on a trailer, it's what we call actual cash value insurance, meaning to say if you bought it for 10, we might give you 10, but we're surely not going to give you 20 if the value of the trailer has gone up in the marketplace. The older the trailer becomes, that value is going to be challenged more and more. Not unlike a vehicle that you own, a car, a truck that may be older. Everybody's heard the horror stories of their car being written off and the insuring company giving them 50 cents for the car when it might be worth considerably more in the mind of the consumer. But from the insurer's perspective, it's very depreciated. That's the sort of detail that we would want. We also want a picture of the serial plate number or the serial number on the plate that's on the vehicle that's attached to the trailer to match it against the ownership. And you'd be surprised how often they don't match when we get applications in from clients. So we want to make sure that all of that information is correct so that if it's stolen, if there is damage to the trailer, then we've got an actual record of serial number so we know what we're dealing with. I guess the last thing I'll say is this: there's this additional exposure from a liability perspective called care, custody, and control. And I'm gonna if you're a member of your provincial equine association, assuming you're a Canadian listening to this, then you have some liability insurance attached to your membership in that provincial equine association, and part of that liability coverage speaks to the care, custody, and control of a non-owned horse in a personal environment. So back to the original story. I'm taking your horse to a horse show. We're just friends at the same barn. Something happens en route. I fall asleep at the wheel, and the trailer, we're in an accident. Your horse is injured as a result of my negligence, or it's my responsibility. You potentially could sue me for the value of your animal. Just to say, Mike, you shouldn't have fallen asleep. I entrusted you with my horse. It was in your care, custody, and control while you were driving. The liability insurance associated with Provincial Equine Association coverage will address that. And that's very important. In the absence of those sorts of extensions, the care, custody, and control element might be an exposure that you have that I would not want anyone to be sort of faced with, given that there's a very inexpensive option through membership. The answer is yes and no. The MTO certification is very, very important, but that comes with that license with the permit having been issued. The presumption is that if you've got an ownership of, then you've had the vehicle inspected or it's been inspected. Um, I admit freely that I'm not an expert on what the MTO certification requires here in Ontario. I know that it's rather vague in terms of, and we're not going to talk about whether you have to go through the scales or whether you don't go through the scales, because again, that's a Highway Traffic Act situation. But certification, making sure that it's roadworthy, is certainly presumed and assumed by the insurance company when you make application for the policy. But again, I stress that the liability insurance comes from the vehicle. It extends to the trailer, and that's really where that certification becomes critically important to make sure it's road safe. If the vehicle, I don't know, a wheel fell off, that's not going to be a covered loss under the physical damage anyway, unless there was some impact with something else or some other cause that triggered that damage. Insurers expect the trailer not to be pristine. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it certainly needs to be road safe. And by whatever certification is necessary to make sure it is road safe. That permit being issued by MTO assumes that the brakes have been checked, the lights have been checked, all the other mechanical devices that make the vehicle safe on the roadway are taken care of. Critically important. Some of the things that might void your coverage are non-disclosure of a material fact. You forgot to tell me that the vehicle hasn't ever seen MTO certification, or that the age of the trailer is not has been falsely given to me. The information is not correct. Um, those are material facts that could void the policy. The use of the trailer, it, I suppose in theory it could void the policy, but I don't think it would, because frankly we don't. When we're talking about physical damage coverage, at least, it's less of a concern to the insurer about whether you have my horse in it or your own horse. We're insuring the asset. We're evaluating the asset, the trailer itself, what's in it, what's not in it, how old it is, and all those other things. But non-disclosure, frankly, of a material fact are very common reasons why insurance policies of all types, including trailer insurance, could be voided. Well, we've all done it. You're right. We've all hauled things that were probably not what the vehicle was designed for, because it's a closed trailer. I guess we're back to sort of the same sort of scenario. So the physical damage protections that would be provided to the trailer, those are assessed based on the asset itself. What can it hold? I don't, for instance, we don't. We ask a question: how many horses can you haul? On the trailer, but it's really to give us a sense of how big the trailer is as compared to saying you can't haul anything other than horses. Um, I cannot think of a claim in my 30-year career where if a trailer was involved in an incident where they were hauling something else, obviously not hazardous material. I wouldn't want to hear about a propane tank or some other thing, um, uh, but cattle, to your point, hay, grain, friends moving from one apartment to another, all those things that trailers are used for pretty regularly. I don't think it would have a too much of an impact on the physical damage coverage for the trailer. But let's talk about that whole compensation issue again. Let's talk about the guy that gets very ambitious with his trailer. It's a stock trailer. He can haul any number of species in it, or a wide variety of species. He tells his insurer he hauls horses, and now he's hauling pigs every day or hauling cattle every day, and he's involved in an incident. Could the insurer conceivably say, yeah, your liability insurance was never designed to cover you for the hauling of livestock, even though horses would be deemed to be livestock? It's the material. It's sort of it's non-disclosure of a material fact. Does an insurer want to hear from you every time you decide to hitch the trailer and move a bag of grain from the feed store? No, because those are sort of typical uses, I think, that we would expect the trailer to be used for from time to time. So I think that's perhaps a way to frame this, is just the typical uses of a horse trailer would include potentially occasions where it's not a horse in the trailer. And I have no expectation that that would change the coverage, not if it was incidental. I've had circumstances where a guy, I mentioned propane tanks. I had a client several years ago whose dad was in the propane business, and we found out quite by chance that very regularly my horse guy was hauling multiple propane tanks in the horse trailer for his dad, not doing deliveries per se, but just moving them from one yard to another. Thankfully, no incident ever occurred, but gosh, if it had, it would have been catastrophic because the tanks weren't strapped down. They didn't follow the guidances set out by MTO. It was done very quietly, on the QT. The trailer's enclosed, which you don't do when you're shipping propane. All those things that were wrong. That was a crazy one. I I've had people move people, and I don't want to tell you who was involved in that, but certainly moving a gaggle of friends from one farm to another. That would have been a real problem. We found out about that after the fact. It's not a bus. It's not designed to move passengers. It's illegal to be moving passengers in a trailer like that. However, we all know that it does happen from time to time. I will plead guilty to having attended horses on their way to Guelph, frankly, who were colicking and standing at their head to make sure that they stayed on their feet until we got to the clinic. Gosh, you wouldn't do that now. That was a long time ago, but I expect it probably happens from time to time. People have a tendency to get a little crazy. Um, moving people's stuff, I don't know. I've had we've all moved other people's stuff. Where I get a little concerned is when we move people's stuff and horses at the same time. I think at the beginning of this conversation, Gail, you were telling me about a circumstance where people are moving mattresses and their horses in the same trailer at the same time. Ouch, that would be a big problem if the horse decided to be a horse. Um, anyway, it's never a dull day here in the insurance industry. We hear all kinds of crazy stories. Glad to do it, Gail, always. If people have questions about their trailer insurance, even if I'm not insuring you, of course, we're always available. We do answer calls from all kinds of folks across the industry, and I'm happy to try and help wherever I can.